The police sirens were still echoing in my ears when I realized I'd been living with a monster for 37 years. Standing in my kitchen in Phoenix, Arizona, watching two officers bag the pill bottles my husband had been feeding me every night, I felt my knees buckle. The detective's voice was distant, underwater almost, as she explained what benzodiazepines and antipsychotics do to a healthy person when taken unnecessarily for months. But let me back up. Let me tell you how a woman who raised 3 children, ran a successful catering business, and never missed a church. Sunday became a drugged prisoner in her own home. 3 months earlier, my life looked picture-perfect from the outside. Jim and I lived in a ranch-style house in Scottsdale with a front porch I'd decorated myself, complete with terracotta pots of desert marigolds. We'd been married since I was 22, and he was the steady, reliable type, an accountant who wore the same brand of polo shirts for decades and still opened car doors for me. Our 3 kids were grown and scattered across the country, busy with their own lives. My sister Monica lived just 10 minutes away, and we talked almost daily. She was my person, you know? The one who knew all my secrets, who'd helped me through menopause, who brought over casseroles when I was too tired to cook. The pills started innocently enough. I'd been having trouble sleeping, nothing serious, just the usual worries that come with getting older. Would our retirement savings last? Were the kids really doing okay? Jim suggested I talk to our doctor about something mild to help me rest. Dr. Patterson prescribed a low dose of something I can't even pronounce, and for a few weeks, it helped. But then Jim started managing my medication. He'd bring me the pills every night at 8:30, along with a glass of water and a kiss on the forehead. "For your own good," he'd say, his voice dripping with concern. "You need your rest, sweetheart." I trusted him. Why wouldn't I? This was the man who'd held my hand through 3 difficult pregnancies, who'd built our business from nothing, who still left me love notes on the bathroom mirror. When I started feeling foggy during the day, when simple tasks like balancing the checkbook became impossible, when I'd forget why I'd walked into a room, I blamed myself. I was 62 after all. Maybe this was just what aging felt like. Jim reassured me constantly. "Everyone slows down at our age," he'd say, patting my hand like I was a confused child. "It's normal." But it wasn't normal. Looking back, I can see that now. The way my hands would shake when I tried to pour coffee. The heaviness in my limbs that made walking to the mailbox feel like climbing a mountain. The strange gaps in my memory where entire conversations would just vanish. I'd find notes in my own handwriting that I didn't remember writing. My daughter Sarah called one Sunday and asked why I'd sounded so strange the night before. I had no recollection of talking to her at all. I remember one particular morning, standing in my bathroom and not recognizing my own reflection at first. The woman in the mirror looked hollow, her eyes vacant and glassy. I'd lost so much weight that my wedding ring kept sliding off my finger. I had to start wearing it on my middle finger just to keep it from falling down the drain. When I mentioned this to Jim, he just smiled and said I looked better than ever, that I'd been carrying a few extra pounds anyway. The comment stung, but I was too foggy to process why. I used to love getting ready in the morning. I'd take my time with my makeup, style my hair, choose an outfit that made me feel confident. But during those months, I could barely manage to brush my teeth. My hands would shake so badly that applying lipstick became impossible. I stopped wearing jewelry because I couldn't manage the clasps. My closet was full of beautiful clothes I'd collected over the years, but I lived in the same 3 outfits because choosing required energy I didn't have. The daily routine became a nightmare I couldn't escape. I'd wake up feeling like I was underwater, struggling to break through to the surface. Every movement required conscious thought, lifting my arm, turning my head, standing up from a chair. Things that should have been automatic became monumental tasks. I'd stand in front of the refrigerator for 10 minutes, forgetting why I'd opened it. I'd put the milk in the pantry and the cereal in the fridge. One day, I found myself in the garage with no memory of how I got there, holding car keys I didn't remember picking up. Monica noticed too, but in a way that felt off. She'd visit more often, always when Jim was home, and they'd exchange these looks I couldn't quite read. When I'd try to mention feeling unwell, Monica would cut me off with some story about her own health problems, her recent diabetes diagnosis, her knee that needed replacing. "We're all falling apart," she'd laugh, and Jim would nod in agreement. They tag-teamed my concerns into submission. What I didn't see then, but understand now, was how carefully they choreographed their visits. Monica would show up at specific times, always calling Jim first to coordinate. She'd bring groceries I didn't ask for, cook meals I was too drugged to eat, and clean my house while making pointed comments about how I was letting things go. She'd hold up dusty picture frames and sigh dramatically. "You used to be so particular about keeping things nice," she'd say, her voice dripping with false concern. "I'm worried about you, sis." The thing is, I kept thinking more effort would fix everything. If I just tried harder to stay alert, if I forced myself to exercise more, if I showed Jim and Monica more appreciation for their concern, things would improve. I believed that my family's unity was sacred, that any discomfort I felt was a small price to pay for keeping everyone together and happy. Some nights, lying in bed with my heart racing and my thoughts scattered like puzzle pieces, I'd tell myself this was just a phase. Marriages have rough patches, families go through difficult seasons. I'd survived 3 kids with colic, a failed business venture in our 30s, my mother's long decline into dementia. This was just another challenge to weather. So I sacrificed my health on the altar of that belief. Every night I'd swallow those pills Jim handed me, even when something deep in my gut screamed at me to stop. The medication made me feel like I was moving through thick syrup, like my brain had been wrapped in cotton wool. I stopped driving because I'd gotten confused twice and ended up in the wrong part of town. I gave up my weekly volunteer shift at the food bank because standing for more than an hour left me trembling with exhaustion. My garden, my pride and joy, turned into a tangle of weeds because I couldn't muster the energy to maintain it. Dr. Patterson kept increasing my dosages. Or at least, that's what Jim told me. He handled all my medical appointments by then, said it was easier since I got so confused about dates and times. He'd come home from the pharmacy with new bottles, different colored pills, and I'd take them without question. My body was breaking down, piece by piece, and I was letting it happen because I trusted the 2 people who claimed to love me most in this world. The physical toll was devastating. I lost 23 pounds in 4 months. My hair started falling out in clumps. I'd find myself staring at the television at 2 in the afternoon, unable to remember if I'd eaten breakfast or if it was Tuesday or Saturday. The worst part was the shame. I felt like a burden, like a failing, useless old woman who couldn't even take care of herself anymore. Jim would sigh when he had to help me up from the couch. Monica would make pointed comments about assisted living facilities, about how hard it was to care for aging parents, looking directly at me when she said it. Every small failure became magnified in my mind. I'd drop a glass and spend 20 minutes crying on the kitchen floor, convinced I was losing my grip on reality. I'd forget someone's name mid-conversation and spiral into panic, thinking this was it. This was dementia setting in. Jim and Monica were there for every moment of weakness, reinforcing the narrative that I was declining, that I needed more help, more supervision, more medication. I know you're probably screaming at your screen right now, telling me to wake up, to see what was so obvious. But when you're in it, when the people manipulating you are the same ones who've shared your entire adult life, it's not that simple. Love isn't blind, it's paralyzed. It's being so tangled up in someone else's version of reality that you can't trust your own instincts anymore. The doctor my husband chose never questioned anything. Every visit, the ones I could remember, he'd nod along with Jim's description of my symptoms, never once asking me directly how I felt, never once examining me beyond the basics. He'd adjust the prescriptions based on Jim's reports, and I'd leave with another bag of pills, another month of fog to wade through. I started having small moments of clarity, though, brief windows where the medication would wear thin and I could think almost normally. During those moments, I'd catch Jim watching me with an expression I'd never seen before, calculating and cold. Or I'd overhear Monica on the phone in my kitchen, her voice dropping to a whisper when she realized I'd walked in. These moments never lasted long enough for me to act on them, but they planted seeds of doubt that would eventually bloom into something much bigger. One afternoon, I found myself staring at the pill bottles lined up on my nightstand, and a thought struck me with terrible clarity. These weren't making me better. They were making me worse. But before I could pursue that thought, Jim appeared with my afternoon dose, and the fog rolled back in. Looking back, I can see I was trapped in a cycle that millions of people fall into every year. The trust that makes families work becomes the weapon that destroys them. The very bonds that should protect us become chains. And the people who should advocate for our well-being become our jailers, all while wearing masks of concern and love. The truth is, my body was screaming at me the whole time. The tremors, the confusion, the exhaustion that felt like drowning. But I'd been taught my whole life to ignore my own needs, to put family first, to trust authority figures, especially male ones. Jim was my husband, the head of our household, the one who handled our finances and made the big decisions. Dr. Patterson was a medical professional with degrees on his wall and a confident manner. Who was I to question them? And Monica, Monica. My baby sister, who I'd protected from schoolyard bullies, who I'd loaned money to when her marriage fell apart, who I'd trusted with every secret and fear. She watched me deteriorate and not only did nothing to help, but she encouraged it. That betrayal cut deeper than Jim's, if I'm being honest. You expect your spouse to change sometimes, to disappoint you. But your sister, your blood, that's supposed to mean something. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was having one of my rare, clear moments. Sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee I'd managed to make myself. The house was quiet. Jim had gone to play golf with some buddies, or so he'd said. Monica was supposed to come by later. I was alone, really alone, for the first time in months. That's when I noticed something I'd overlooked 100 times before. A bottle of pills on the counter, not one of mine, with Jim's name on the label. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up and read the prescription. Blood pressure medication, nothing unusual. But then I saw the pharmacy name. It wasn't our usual place. It was a different pharmacy, one clear across town near the hospital where Monica worked as a medical billing clerk. Why would Jim go to that pharmacy? We had a perfectly good one 5 minutes away that we'd used for decades. I sat there holding that bottle, my foggy brain trying to piece together a puzzle I couldn't quite see yet. And then, like a dam breaking, other things started flooding back. Whispered phone calls, locked filing cabinets Jim had installed in his office. Monica's sudden interest in our financial planning. The way they'd both discouraged me from seeing my kids alone, always making excuses about why visits should be short or supervised. I made a decision right there, sitting in my kitchen with the Arizona sun streaming through the window. I wouldn't take the pills that night. Not because I'd figured everything out yet, but because something in me, some deep survival instinct, said stop. Just stop and see what happens. That night, when Jim brought me my usual cocktail of medication, I palmed the pills. I'd seen it done in movies 100 times, thought it was ridiculous, but it worked. I tucked them under my tongue and swallowed the water. As soon as he left the room, I spit them into a tissue and hid them in my nightstand drawer. Then I lay in bed, my heart pounding, waiting to see if he'd check, if he'd know somehow. But he didn't. He just kissed my forehead and went to watch the evening news. The next morning, I woke up feeling different. Not great, not healthy, but different. The fog was thinner. I could follow the plot of the morning show on TV. I remembered to take my coffee cup to the sink. Small things, but they felt enormous. I did it again that night, and the night after. Each day I felt a little more like myself, the real me, the woman who'd once run a business and raised 3 kids and knew her own mind. But with clarity came horror. because as my head cleared, I started to see what they'd done to me. How long had this been going on? The prescription bottles were dated back 9 months. 9 months of my life, stolen. 9 months of being drugged into submission. But why? That was the question that haunted me as I lay awake those nights, pretending to be sedated while my mind raced. I started investigating in small ways during the hours when Jim was out and Monica hadn't stopped by yet. I'd search his office quickly, carefully, always making sure to put things back exactly as I'd found them. I discovered files I'd never seen before, financial documents with my signature on them, but I had no memory of signing. Bank accounts I didn't know we had. A power of attorney agreement giving Jim control over all our assets. My hands shook as I photographed these documents with my phone, one of the few things I could still manage without arousing suspicion. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed help. I needed someone outside this poisoned circle. And that's when I thought of someone I hadn't considered before. Someone so unlikely that Jim and Monica would never suspect them. My grandson Tyler. He was only 12 years old, but that kid was sharp. He'd always asked questions, noticed things. And more importantly, he was young enough that they'd never see him as a threat. The next time my daughter Sarah brought him over for a visit, carefully supervised as always, I managed to slip him a note when Monica went to answer her phone. It just said, "Grandma needs help. The pills are wrong. Tell no one." I prayed he'd understand, that he wouldn't just hand it to his mother, or worse, to Jim. 3 days later, I got my answer. Tyler showed up with Sarah for another visit, but this time he had his phone out, filming everything like kids do. Except he wasn't just filming randomly. He was documenting Jim's careful preparation of my evening medication, Monica's pointed comments about my memory, the way they'd both redirect any conversation I tried to have about feeling unwell. That boy was creating evidence, and he was doing it right under their noses. Later, Sarah called me, her voice tight with tension. Tyler had shown her the video. And then he'd said something that broke through all her carefully constructed denial. "Mom, why does Grandma take so many pills? My health teacher said old people get prescribed too much medication all the time. She said it's really dangerous. Out of the mouths of babes, right? Sometimes it takes a child's innocent observation to shatter the lies adults tell themselves." Sarah started asking questions. She went through my medical records, which as my daughter, she had a right to access. She talked to pharmacists. She discovered something that made her blood run cold. The medications I was taking, in those combinations and dosages, should never have been prescribed to someone my age without serious psychiatric conditions. And Dr. Patterson? He'd been receiving kickbacks from pharmaceutical companies for years. It was all there in public records, if anyone had bothered to look. The investigation Sarah conducted was methodical and thorough. She spent 2 weeks making calls, gathering documents, building a case. She contacted every pharmacy in the Phoenix area, requesting records of prescriptions filled under my name. What she found was staggering. 7 different pharmacies, dozens of prescriptions, many for the same medications but in different dosages. It was classic doctor shopping, except I wasn't the one doing the shopping. Jim was. Sarah also did something I never would have thought of. She called my old friends, women I'd stopped seeing months ago because I'd been too foggy to maintain friendships. She asked them when they'd last seen me, how I'd seemed, if they'd noticed any changes. Their answers painted a devastating picture. Linda, who I'd known for 30 years, said I'd canceled lunch 3 times in a row, each time sounding confused and exhausted. Margaret said the last time she'd visited, I'd fallen asleep mid-conversation. Karen said she'd tried to call dozens of times, but Jim always answered and said I was resting, that I'd call her back, but I never did. My daughter compiled all of this into a file that would eventually become evidence in a criminal investigation. But before she went to the police, she did one more thing. She hired a private investigator to follow Jim and Monica. She needed to know what they were doing with all that time they spent together, what they talked about, where they went. The investigator's report was damning. It later learned that studies showed older adults are prescribed an average of 7 different medications, and that medication errors account for nearly 700,000 emergency department visits annually among people over 65. I wasn't just a victim of my family's greed. I was caught in a healthcare system that fails elderly patients every single day. But my family had weaponized that failure, turned it into their own personal cash-grabbing scheme. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After Tyler's video and Sarah's investigation, things moved fast. She contacted a lawyer, a fierce woman named Rebecca Chen, who specialized in elder abuse cases. Rebecca looked at my documents, and her expression went from professional concern to barely controlled rage. "Mrs. Morrison," she said, "what they've done to you is a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. We're talking about assault, false imprisonment, financial exploitation, conspiracy. You understand that?" I did, and I didn't. Part of me still couldn't fully accept that my husband and sister had conspired to drug me into compliance while they stripped away my assets. The evidence was there, the facts were undeniable, but my heart lagged behind my head. How do you reconcile 37 years of marriage with calculated betrayal? How do you square decades of sisterhood with deliberate harm? Rebecca had me see an independent doctor, one with no connection to Jim or Dr. Patterson. This physician, Dr. Sarah Goldstein, ran every test imaginable: blood work, cognitive assessments, brain scans. The results were devastating and validating in equal measure. I'd been systematically poisoned with benzodiazepines and antipsychotic medications that I'd never needed. The damage to my body was extensive. My liver was compromised. My cognitive function had declined to the level of someone with early-stage dementia, though Dr. Goldstein assured me it would likely improve once I was fully detoxed. The tremors might be permanent. The memory gaps from those 9 months would never return. "You're lucky to be alive," Dr. Goldstein said, and she wasn't being dramatic. "Elderly people die from medication interactions all the time." That's what Jim and Monica had been counting on, I think. That eventually my body would just give out, and everyone would chalk it up to natural causes. Poor Jim, left a widower. Poor Monica, losing her sister. And they'd console each other all the way to the bank, splitting my life insurance, my half of the house, my retirement accounts, everything we'd built together. The plan had been elegant in its simplicity. Jim had been slowly transferring assets into accounts only he controlled. He'd convinced me to sign papers I was too drugged to read, witnessed by Monica, who had no problem falsifying her signature as a notary. They'd planned to have me declared incompetent eventually, probably would have pushed for a nursing home placement, and then they'd have had total control. I'd have lived out my remaining years in a fog of medication, warehoused and forgotten, while they spent my money. Except Tyler saw through it. A 12-year-old boy with a sense of justice and a smartphone saved my life. I owe that kid everything. One evening, after I'd been secretly off the medication for 3 weeks, I followed Jim. He'd said he was going to meet his golf buddies at their usual bar, but something told me to check. Sarah had hired a private investigator to tail Monica, and I figured turnabout was fair play. I got in my car, my hands still a bit shaky, but my mind clearer than it had been in months, and I followed my husband of nearly 4 decades as he drove across Phoenix. The drive felt surreal. I stayed 3 cars back, like they do in movies, my heart hammering in my chest. Every red light felt like an eternity. Every turn he made, I second-guessed myself. Maybe he really was going to meet his friends. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe the medications had damaged my brain more than I thought, and I was imagining conspiracies where none existed. But then he turned onto Indian School Road, heading east, away from his usual haunts. He drove for 20 minutes, and I followed, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. The sun was setting, painting the desert sky in shades of orange and purple, and I remember thinking how beautiful it was, how strange to be tailing my own husband during such a gorgeous sunset. He didn't go to any bar. He went to a title company. And waiting for him in the parking lot was Monica. They met up like co-conspirators in a bad movie, looking around before going inside together. I sat in my car, watching, my whole body trembling with something between rage and grief. What were they doing in there? Transferring more property? Setting up another account I didn't know about? I watched them through the windows of the title company. They were sitting at a desk with a man in a suit, signing papers, laughing at something he said. Monica touched Jim's arm in a way that made my stomach turn. Not romantic, but familiar, comfortable, conspiratorial. They were partners in this, equal participants in my destruction. The sight of them sitting there, casually signing away my life, made something inside me crack open. I didn't wait to find out. I called Rebecca, and I called the police. When Jim came home that night, I was waiting for him with Officer Martinez and Detective Riley. The look on his face when he walked into our living room and saw the police would have been comical if the situation wasn't so tragic. All the color drained out of him. His mouth opened and closed like a fish, and then he tried to run. A 68-year-old accountant trying to flee through the back door while 2 cops watched was almost sad. They had him in handcuffs before he made it to the patio. That's when I walked up to him, looked him in the eye for the first time in weeks with a clear head, and said the words I'd been practicing. "I know everything, Jim, and you're going to pay for what you did to me." He tried to deny it at first, told the officers I was confused, that I was sick, that I needed my medication. But Detective Riley had already seen the evidence Sarah and I had compiled. The bank records, the forged signatures, the pill bottles, Tyler's video, Dr. Goldstein's medical report documenting the poisoning. It was all there, a clear pattern of elder abuse and financial exploitation. The interrogation that followed, which I learned about later from Detective Riley, was a masterclass in denial and deflection. Jim sat in that interview room for 6 hours, maintaining his innocence, insisting that I'd always been unstable, that he was just trying to help me. He painted himself as a devoted husband dealing with a mentally ill wife. He had answers for everything, explanations that might have made sense if you didn't look too closely. But Detective Riley was thorough. She showed him the bank records, the ones that proved he'd transferred over $300,000 into accounts I didn't know existed. She showed him the power of attorney documents with signatures that didn't quite match mine. She showed him Tyler's video, where his voice could be heard clearly saying, "Take all 3 pills, honey. Doctor's orders." 3 pills I'd never needed that were slowly killing me. And then she asked him the question that broke him. "If you were really concerned about your wife's health, Mr. Morrison, why did you take her to a doctor who was under investigation by the medical board for overprescribing controlled substances to elderly patients?" He didn't have an answer for that. Monica was arrested the same night at her house. She tried the same tactic Jim had, claiming I was mentally ill, that I'd always been unstable, that she and Jim were just trying to protect me from myself. But the facts didn't care about her lies. The paper trail was too clear, the medical evidence too damning. When the police searched her house, they found something that made me physically ill. A journal hidden in her bedroom closet where she documented everything, every dose increase, every symptom I'd exhibited, every piece of property Jim had transferred. She'd treated my destruction like a project, with notes and timelines and goals. Phase 1 complete, Jay convinced her to sign POA. Phase 2, increase evening meds to 3 pills. Phase 3, begin isolation from children. It went on for pages. The most chilling entry was dated just 2 weeks before I stopped taking the pills. It read, "She's declining faster than expected. Dr. P says another 6 weeks at this dosage, and we can push for nursing home. Jay found a facility that takes Medicaid after private pay runs out. Perfect." They'd had it all planned out. Every step, every manipulation, every theft. And they documented it, arrogant enough to believe they'd never get caught. The next morning, I stopped taking pills entirely. I mean, really stopped. Under proper medical supervision this time. Dr. Goldstein helped me through the withdrawal, which was its own kind of hell. Your body gets dependent on those chemicals, even when they're poisoning you. I spent 2 weeks feeling like my skin was crawling, like I might jump out of my own body. But I got through it, and on the other side was a clarity I hadn't felt in almost a year. I started noticing things I'd missed: the color of the sunset over the desert, the taste of my coffee in the morning, the sound of my own laugh when Sarah told a joke. These small things, these ordinary miracles that Jim and Monica had stolen from me, came flooding back. I was reclaiming my life one sensation at a time. The confrontation I'd been building up to happened about a month later, during a court hearing for the restraining orders I'd filed against both Jim and Monica. They sat on opposite sides of the courtroom from me, both of them dressed in their Sunday best, both of them trying to look like the victims in this story. Jim's lawyer painted me as a confused old woman taking revenge on a devoted husband. Monica's lawyer suggested I'd always been jealous of her, that this was some kind of late-life mental breakdown. But when it was my turn to speak, I stood up in that courtroom, and I told my truth. Every word of it. The pills, the fog, the stolen assets, the forged signatures, the conspiracy that would have ended with my death or permanent institutionalization. I spoke for 45 minutes, and the courtroom was dead silent. Even the stenographer had tears in her eyes by the time I finished. The judge granted the restraining orders immediately. He also ordered a forensic accounting of all our assets and referred the criminal aspects to the district attorney. Jim and Monica were looking at serious charges: assault, conspiracy, financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult, forgery, fraud. The DA told me they could each face up to 20 years in prison. But here's where my story takes a turn you might not expect. And I need to be honest with you about this part, even though it still makes me angry. The justice system failed me in the end. Not completely, but enough that it stings. Jim's lawyer was expensive and good. He got the assault charges reduced to reckless endangerment. The financial exploitation charges were harder to prove than you'd think, because some of those signatures were mine, even if I'd been drugged when I signed. Intent is tricky to prove in court. Monica took a plea deal that gave her probation and community service in exchange for testifying against Jim. In the end, Jim spent 18 months in minimum security prison. 18 months for 9 months of poisoning me, for plotting to steal everything I'd worked for my entire life, for trying to make me disappear into pharmaceutical oblivion. He was released last spring. He lives in Tucson now, works at a friend's accounting firm, and from what I hear, he's playing the victim, telling everyone who will listen that his crazy ex-wife manufactured the whole thing. Monica never served a day. She paid a fine, did some community service hours at a homeless shelter, and got to keep her job. We haven't spoken since the day she was arrested. She sends cards on holidays, trying to reconcile, but I throw them away without opening them. Some betrayals are too deep for forgiveness, and I'm done pretending otherwise. So do you think that was fair? 18 months in a country club prison for trying to drug me to death? Probation for my sister who watched me deteriorate and encouraged it? Tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. Because I'm still grappling with whether justice was actually served or if I just have to live with the fact that sometimes the bad guys win. But here's the thing, and this is important. Even though they didn't get the punishment I think they deserved, even though Jim got to walk away with his life relatively intact, even though Monica gets to pretend nothing happened, I still won. Not in the way I wanted, not with the satisfying prison sentences and public humiliation I'd fantasized about. But I won where it mattered most. I got my life back. I got my mind back. I got my freedom back. And they'll never have power over me again. 6 months after the court case concluded, I did something I never thought I'd have the courage to do. I sold the house in Scottsdale. That beautiful ranch with the porch I'd loved so much had become a crime scene in my mind. Every room held ghosts of my drugged self, shuffling through the fog, trusting people who were trying to destroy me. I couldn't heal there. So I sold it, took my share of the assets that remained after legal fees, and I moved. I found a little apartment in Flagstaff, up in the mountains, where the air is cool and clean. It's small, just 2 bedrooms and a tiny balcony, but it's mine. No one has keys but me. No one brings me pills I don't ask for. No one watches me with calculating eyes, waiting for me to break down enough that they can finish what they started. I wake up every morning in that apartment, and the first thing I think is, I'm free. The physical recovery took longer than I expected. The tremors in my hands persist, especially when I'm tired or stressed. My short-term memory isn't what it used to be, and I've had to develop systems to compensate, notes everywhere, calendar alerts for everything, lists upon lists. Dr. Goldstein says this is as good as it's going to get, that the damage from those months of chemical assault can't be completely undone. But you know what? I'll take imperfect freedom over medicated slavery any day of the week. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since my 20s. My hands shake too much for detail work, but abstract art doesn't care about tremors. I've found that splashing color on canvas is therapeutic in ways talk therapy never quite managed. Each painting is a reclamation, proof that I'm still here, still creating, still refusing to be erased. Sarah visits often, and she brings Tyler every time. That boy and I have a special bond now. He calls me his superhero grandma, which makes me laugh every time. He's 14 now, starting high school, and he's talking about becoming a lawyer when he grows up. So I can help people like you, he says. If that's the legacy that comes out of this nightmare, I'll take it. My other kids have been slower to come around. My son Mark struggled with accepting that his father was capable of something so monstrous. He still takes Jim's calls, still meets him for lunch sometimes, and I've had to make peace with that. They're adults, they get to decide their own relationships, even if it hurts that Mark chose to maintain a connection with the man who tried to destroy me. My daughter Julie took it the hardest. Went through a period where she didn't talk to any of us, trying to process the fact that her entire childhood was built on a lie. She's in therapy now. We're slowly rebuilding our relationship, but it's different than it was. Everything is different than it was. I've had to accept that some things can't be recovered. Those 9 months are gone. The memories, the experiences, the time. I'll never get them back. The trust I used to have in people, the easy way I used to believe the best of everyone, that's gone too. I'm more suspicious now, more guarded. Sometimes I catch myself questioning everything, wondering if the barista who seems friendly has an ulterior motive, if the neighbor who waves hello wants something from me. It's exhausting, living with that level of wariness, but it's also kept me safe. But I've gained things too. A backbone I didn't know I had. The ability to say no without explaining myself. The understanding that being alone isn't the same as being lonely, and sometimes it's actually the better option. I've learned that you can love someone for decades and still not really know them, and that the truest thing you can know about another person is what they do when they think you're too weak to fight back. I joined a support group for elder abuse survivors. That's where I heard the statistic that changed everything for me, that made me realize I wasn't some unique case of bad luck, but part of an epidemic we don't talk about enough. Studies estimate that 1 in 10 Americans over 60 experiences some form of elder abuse each year. 1 in 10. That's millions of people, mostly abused by the very people who are supposed to care for them. Family members, caregivers, trusted professionals. And financial exploitation is the most common type. It's not the dramatic stuff you see in movies. It's what happened to me. Trusted people gradually taking control of assets, isolating the victim, making them dependent, sometimes drugging them into compliance. It happens to wealthy people and poor people alike. Education doesn't protect you. Intelligence doesn't protect you. Being careful your whole life doesn't protect you, because the weapon they use against you is your own love and trust. The support group taught me something else too. Victims of elder abuse often develop serious health problems that persist long after the abuse ends. Depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder. Physical disabilities that come from neglect or direct harm. cognitive decline that might not have happened if they hadn't been isolated and medicated. I wasn't just being dramatic when I said those pills damaged me. The medical research backs it up. What Jim and Monica did to me will affect my health for the rest of my life. But knowing all this, understanding that I'm part of a larger pattern, has actually helped. It's made me realize that what happened to me wasn't my fault. I didn't fail to see the signs because I was stupid or naive. I failed to see the signs because the people abusing me were experts at hiding them, and because our society hasn't educated people about what elder abuse looks like. We talk about child abuse, about domestic violence between spouses, but we're weirdly silent about the abuse of elderly people by their own families. So let me tell you what I learned, because maybe it'll help someone watching this. Before I end my story, I want to share something important I learned through all of this. Financial protection is crucial, especially as you age. And I'm not just talking about basic stuff like having a will or a power of attorney, though those are important. I'm talking about active, ongoing protection of your assets and your autonomy. First, never give anyone, not your spouse, not your children, not your siblings, complete control over your finances. I don't care how much you trust them. I don't care how long you've been together. Keep accounts in your name only. Keep passwords private. Review your bank statements yourself every single month. If someone suggests you don't need to worry about money stuff because they'll handle it, that's a red flag the size of Texas. Second, diversify who has information about your life. Don't let one person be your only connection to the outside world. Keep relationships with friends, with your kids, with your church or community groups. Isolation is the abuser's best friend. They want you cut off from anyone who might notice what's happening and intervene. Fight against that isolation with everything you have. Third, be your own advocate at the doctor's office. Bring a list of your medications. Ask questions about side effects. If your doctor won't talk to you directly, if they only address your spouse or caregiver, find a new doctor. You have a right to be treated as a competent adult until proven otherwise. Don't let anyone infantilize you. Fourth, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. I ignored my instincts for months because I thought I was being paranoid or ungrateful. But that little voice telling me something was off was right. Your body knows when you're being harmed, even if your mind is trying to make excuses. Listen to it. Fifth, and this is so important, have honest conversations about money and care before you need them. Talk to your kids about how you want to be treated if you become incapacitated. Put your wishes in writing and make sure multiple people have copies. Talk about what elder abuse looks like. Make a plan for how they'd know if you were being exploited. Don't let it be a taboo subject that no one discusses until it's too late. The statistics are sobering. Only 1 in 24 cases of elder abuse gets reported to authorities. Financial exploitation alone costs elderly Americans approximately $36 billion every year. And the abusers? 90% of the time, they're family members or trusted caregivers. The people who are supposed to protect us are the ones most likely to harm us. And we're all walking around pretending it doesn't happen. I'm telling you this not to scare you, but to prepare you. Knowledge is power, and the more you know about how these schemes work, the better equipped you are to protect yourself and the elderly people you love. Watch for warning signs, unexplained withdrawals, new friends who are suddenly very involved in finances, changes to legal documents that the elderly person doesn't remember signing, isolation from friends and family, sudden decline in health or appearance. And if you suspect someone is being abused, say something. Call Adult Protective Services. Talk to the person alone, away from the suspected abuser. Offer help. Don't assume someone else will handle it or that the victim will ask for help. They're usually too ashamed, too confused, or too controlled to reach out. They need someone to reach in. The other thing I learned is about the healthcare system's role in all this. Dr. Patterson wasn't just a bad doctor. He was part of a larger problem. Elderly patients are often over-medicated, prescribe drugs that interact badly with each other, given powerful medications without proper oversight. And doctors often don't take the time to really listen to elderly patients or to get information directly from them rather than from caregivers who might not have the patient's best interests at heart. If you're over 65, bring someone you trust to your appointments, but make sure the doctor talks to you first, not to your companion. Keep a list of all your medications and update it regularly. Ask about every new prescription. Why do I need this? What are the side effects? How does it interact with my other medications? Are there non-pharmaceutical options? Don't be afraid to get a second opinion, especially if you're being told you need psychiatric medications you've never needed before. And for God's sake, if you start feeling foggy or confused or different in ways that worry you, speak up, loudly. Don't let anyone convince you it's just normal aging. Some cognitive decline happens to everyone, but what I experienced was not normal. It was poisoning. And if I hadn't stopped taking those pills when I did, if Tyler hadn't noticed something was wrong, I might not be here today. I want to end by talking directly to anyone watching this who sees themselves in my story. Maybe you're starting to notice that your medications make you feel strange. Maybe your spouse or child has been pushing you to sign documents you don't fully understand. Maybe you feel isolated, controlled, diminished. Maybe you've caught your family members in lies about money or about your health. Maybe, like me, you've been trying so hard to keep the peace that you've ignored your own warning signals. Please, please listen to those signals. You're not being paranoid. You're not being ungrateful. You're not being difficult. You're noticing that something is wrong, and that noticing might save your life. Reach out to someone outside your immediate circle. A friend from church, a neighbor, a cousin you haven't talked to in years. Tell them what's happening. Ask them to help you investigate. Don't suffer in silence because you're afraid of causing problems, or because you don't want to believe your loved ones could hurt you. The hardest thing I've had to accept is that the people who hurt me didn't suddenly become monsters. They were always capable of this. I just never wanted to see it. Jim was always a bit controlling, always needed to be in charge, always resented when I had my own money or my own opinions. Monica was always a little jealous, always competing with me, always resentful that I'd built a successful business while she struggled. The seeds were always there. The opportunity of my trust and my vulnerability, just let those seeds grow into something poisonous. That doesn't make it my fault. Nothing I did justified what they did to me. But it does mean that maybe the signs were there earlier than I thought, and maybe if I'd been more willing to see people's flaws, I could have protected myself better. That's not victim blaming. That's just reality. We're taught to give people the benefit of the doubt, to believe the best, to trust family above all else. Sometimes that's the right thing to do. Sometimes it's a death sentence. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I know it was a lot. It was a lot to live through, and it's still a lot to process. But I wanted to share it, because I think these stories need to be told. Elder abuse thrives in silence, in the shame victims feel, in the disbelief of society. The more we talk about it, the more we recognize it, the harder it becomes for abusers to operate. I'm curious, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Are you at home, at work, in your car? However you found this story, I'm grateful you listened. If it connected with you in any way, please hit that like button. It really does help more people find these stories. And I want to hear from you in the comments. What would you have done in my place? Do you think the justice system failed me, or am I being too harsh? Have you or someone you know experienced elder abuse? What warning signs did you notice? Let's start a conversation, because that's how we protect each other. If you want more stories like this, I've got 2 other videos I think you'll find interesting. There's one about a woman who discovered her husband was running a Ponzi scheme, and another about a daughter who fought to free her mother from a predatory conservatorship. Both are linked below, and of course, if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Every week I share stories of survival, resilience, and justice. Sometimes the endings are happy, sometimes they're complicated like mine, but they're always real and they're always told from the heart. Until the next story, take care of your heart and protect your peace. Remember,